Doctors in Gaza say at least 30 Palestinians, including children, have been killed in the latest Israeli airstrikes. Mediators are still working to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. For children in Gaza, a deal can't come soon enough. Most have already lost family, friends, and their homes. And with schools closed, they're also losing their education.
This is Khaldoun. He's 10 years old. His family was driven from Beit Hanun in northern Gaza at the start of the war. Now they live in makeshift tents in central Gaza.
My wish is to go back to school so that we can write and learn. But the Israelis want us to be ignorant. We want to learn and become doctors.
Now, instead of going to class, he queues up at one of Gaza's charity soup kitchens to get a meal for his family.
We had never been to a charity in our lives. And now we go there to get food. We had money to buy food, but now we have to go to the soup kitchen.
Often, Khaldoun has to go to several places to get enough for his family, and he must fight for every bite. Muhammad is also 10 years old. He can barely carry his family's daily supply of water.
I wait in line for an hour or two, and if I don't get water, we might die of thirst.
He too misses his old life and his school, and he lives in constant fear.
I'm afraid of the war and of the rockets, and I'm afraid for my future and of returning to school, that it will be bombed.
After waiting so long, Khaldoun is exhausted and still hungry.
I wish the war would end. I'm afraid of the bombing and everything. I want the war to end so I can go back to our home and back to school. The future's gone now. There's nothing left.
One of thousands of kids here watching their lives slip away, with little hope that things will get better anytime soon.
For more, let's speak to Rosalia Bolin, a communications specialist with UNICEF. And she's based in Gaza, but currently in Amman, Jordan this week, where she joins us now. A warm welcome to DW. Can you tell us what you have seen in your work in Gaza? With winter now here, can you describe what the situation is like?
Yes, absolutely. The stories that you just highlighted of these two boys, sadly, those aren't isolated stories. It's a daily reality for all children in Gaza. Whether I drive through the south, the central part, or the north of Gaza, I see hundreds of children queuing for bread, for flour. You may have heard of two adolescent girls who were crushed to death at the end of November at a UN-supported bakery just across the street from our UNICEF office. And that really sums it up, people queuing and fighting over food. I see children scavenging through the garbage, looking not just for food scraps, but also for any material they can use to sort of strengthen their shelters. Their shelters are made of all sorts of materials, whatever people can get their hands on, cloth, blanket, plastic. It doesn't keep people warm. Children are cold, they're ill, they're sick. And children are also looking in the waste for plastic to burn, especially in northern Gaza where there's no cooking gas. And so people have nothing to actually cook on. These children, they should be in school. These children are also deeply, deeply traumatized over 14 months of bombing into this war.
And despite those absolutely devastating conditions you're describing, we did see in our report those children still yearning to go back to school. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it means to have so many children out of school, what it means for them and for their futures in Gaza?
School is indeed a recurrent theme. Whenever I speak to children, the thing they want most is to go back to school, not just for learning, but also because school is a place for socialization as well. It's a place where they can meet with their friends and they can be child again. Children in Gaza, they now have to complete tasks that really no child should have to take care of, from queuing for hours at food kitchens, fetching water. Lots of children also, at least 17,000 children are estimated to be separated or unaccompanied. So these children are even more vulnerable. And all of them yearn for school. And many children also tell me they would like to return to their houses and they'd like to return to their beds. They want to be in their rooms with their toys. They want to be able to be child again. The fact that they cannot, that will have an impact on this current generation and also on the generation to come. This is an extremely worrying facet of this war. Children's rights are violated in so many different ways at all levels, really. Children are utterly deprived and their suffering is unimaginable. But what is also an important aspect is that their futures are being destroyed. Their immune systems are completely worn out. As I said, the entire child population of Gaza is traumatized. But on top of that, they now lose a second year of school and of learning. So this is deeply worrying.
And you've mentioned the trauma that all this leads to as well. A recent study by an NGO, War Child, it shows that almost all children in Gaza are traumatized. Is there any way under these current circumstances to help them cope with that trauma?
Yeah, so to comment on the really prevalent and very visible trauma and distress that children in Gaza face. When I meet with children, the moment a plane flies over or a drone, a quadcopter, the moment the children hear the sound of this plane, they freeze, they're in great distress. They usually try to reach for my hand, although I'm a stranger, but they look for adults, they look for their parents, they start crying. Some children display aggressive behavior, including with other children. It's really the entire child population of Gaza that is in need of mental health and psychosocial support. UNICEF is one of the many actors that is trying to support children with those type of services. But I have to confess, sometimes for us humanitarians, it does feel like we're carrying water to the sea almost, because we invest in these mental health sessions with children, but as long as the source of the stress, as long as the attacks continue, it's very hard for these children to be given an opportunity to recover. The type of sessions that we support frequently involve art, storytelling, photos. Children are shown pictures of all sorts of scenes, and through these pictures they talk about their trauma. But as long as the airstrikes continue, as long as the bullets keep coming, these children are not offered a second of respite.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on DW to speak about these issues. That is Rosalia Bolin, a communications specialist with UNICEF based in Gaza. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
For more on this, we can talk now with Jamil Sawalmeh. He's country director for the NGO Action Aid Palestine in the West Bank. Thank you very much for taking time to speak with us. Jamil, we've just seen in our report how many children in Gaza are displaced, struggling to get just food and water. Tell us more what life is like for kids in Gaza.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, for having me. Well, absolutely, the conflict in Gaza is certainly affecting children and women in particular, where we have seen more than 90% of the population in Gaza that has been displaced several times. Unfortunately, children are also paying the highest price for this particular war, where more than 13,000 children have been killed and more than 26,000 that have been injured, and also additionally 18,000 who have lost at least one parent. So they became unaccompanied in most of the cases. The situation for children in Gaza is extremely dire and heartbreaking, of course, as they face severe conditions, severe living conditions, lack of access to basic services, and also facing malnutrition and hunger, where according to UNICEF now 96% of women and children in Gaza are facing difficulties accessing basic nutritional needs. In addition to that, of course, the psychological distress that is also accompanied children throughout this particular war. In fact, children are living through severe conditions, and they're also suffering from displacement and loss of their parents and their family members. In addition, of course, to the overall situation that they are going through, living conditions, displacement conditions, and also the constant fear. According also to UNICEF, children in Gaza, there's no wonder that they are facing, or actually showing signs and symptoms of trauma and psychological distress, and of course a growing sense of despair and fear.
Of course, it's not just the kids in Gaza who are traumatized. Many adults are too. Are they in any position, Jamil, to help these children?
Of course, all international actors and UN agencies are actually doing their best now. But to be honest with you, what we need now is an immediate and sustainable ceasefire that can help children and those who are most vulnerable within the Gaza population to regain some sense of normalcy in their life. And of course, amid the crisis, all international and aid actors, including Action Aid, have tried their best to provide basic services, including food, nutrition, and health services. But the conditions on the ground remain very challenging for all of the humanitarian actors. There's very, very little safety and security margins where organizations operate in Gaza, in the so-called humanitarian zones, where we have seen even aid agencies and medical teams have come under fire, unfortunately.
Right.
So all actors are trying their best, but the conditions on the ground are very, very challenging.
Now, in our report, we heard from two boys there expressing their desire to go back to school. How, if at all, can schools help kids cope with trauma of the kind that these children are going through?
Of course, schools are considered the anchor of any community. And children in particular regain a sense of normalcy in their lives when attending school. So unfortunately, the children in Gaza have lost 2 consecutive scholastic years. Therefore, amidst the crisis, all humanitarian actors, including UN agencies, are trying to establish temporary spaces for children to be engaged in some meaningful learning activities and some also psychosocial support activities. So schools are very important in the lives of children, where education is sort of the most important activity for children in this particular age group. We definitely need to work with the children in Gaza to be able to access some safe learning spaces, also to minimize the loss, their learning loss in terms of losing schools for 2 consecutive years. It is definitely a deeply distressing situation now, where children are not able to attend any sort of learning activities in their lives.
Right. Jamil, thank you for taking time to talk with us today. That was Jamil Sawalmeh with Action Aid Palestine in the West Bank.
Absolutely, thank you.